And all I'm going to try and prove to you with these slides is that I do just very straight stuff, and my ideas are, in my head anyway, they're very logical and relate to what's going on, and problem solving for clients, and I either convince clients at the end that I solve their problems, or I really do solve their problems, because usually they seem to like it. I've been in practice since 1962, but the architectural media thinks I just started here, so I let them believe it. Anyway, I did this house in Santa Monica, and it got a lot of notoriety, and in fact, it appeared in a porno comic book, which is the slide on the right. In the 60s, I started working with paper furniture and made a bunch of stuff that was very successful in Bloomingdale's. We even made flooring and walls and everything out of cardboard. And the success of it threw me for a loop. I couldn't deal with the success of furniture. I wasn't secure enough as an architect, and so I closed it all up and made furniture that nobody would like. So nobody would like this, and it was in this preliminary to this these pieces of furniture that Ricky and I worked on furniture by the slice. And after we failed, I just kept failing. The piece on the left, and ultimately led to the piece on the right, happened when the kid that was working on this took one of those long strings of stuff and folded it up to put it in the wastebasket. And I put a piece of tape around it, as you see there, and realized you could sit on it, and it had a lot of resilience and strength and so on. So it was an accidental discovery. I got into fish. I mean, the story I tell is that I got mad at postmodernism at POMO and said that fish were 500 million years earlier than man, and if you're going to go back, we might as well go back to the beginning. And so I started making these funny things, and they started to have a life of their own and got bigger as the one glass at the Walker, and then I sliced off the head and the tail and everything, and tried to translate what I was learning about the form of the fish and the movement, and a lot of architectural ideas that came from it. Accidental again. It was an intuitive kind of thing, and I just kept going with it, and made this proposal for a building, which was only a proposal. And then after a series of great misunderstandings because we didn't speak the same language, I did this building in Japan. I was taken out to dinner after the contract for this little restaurant was signed. And I love sake and Kobe and all that stuff. And after I was really drunk, I was asked to do some sketches on napkins. And I made some sketches on napkins, the little boxes and Morandi-like things that I used to do. And the client said, "Why no fish?" And so I made a drawing with a fish. And I left Japan. 3 weeks later, I received a complete set of drawings saying we'd won the competition. Now, it's hard to translate a fish form because they're so beautiful and perfect into a building or an object like this. And Oldenburg, who I work with a little once in a while, told me I couldn't do it. And so that made it even more exciting. But he was right. I couldn't do the tail. I started to get the head okay, but the tail I couldn't do. It was pretty hard. The thing on the right is a snake form, or ziggurat, and I put them together, and you walk between them, and it was a dialogue with the context again. Now, if you saw a picture of this as it was published in Architectural Record, they didn't show the context, so you would think, God, what a pushy guy this is. But a friend of mine spent 4 hours wandering around here looking for this restaurant, couldn't find it. So it's... And as for craft and technology and all of those things that you've all been talking about, I was thrown for a complete loop. This was built in 6 months. The way we sent drawings to Japan, we used the magic computer in Michigan that does car models, and we made foam models, which that thing scanned, and we made the drawings of the fish and the scales. And when I got there, everything was perfect, except the tail. So I decided to cut off the head and the tail. And I made the object on the left for my show at the Walker, and it's one of the nicest pieces I've ever made, I think. And then Jay Chiat, a friend and client, asked me to do his headquarters building in LA for reasons we don't want to talk about. It got delayed. Toxic waste, I guess, is the key clue to that one. And so we built a temporary building. I'm getting good at temporary buildings. And we put a conference room in that's a fish. And finally, Jay dragged me to my hometown, Toronto, Canada. And there is a story, it's a real story, about my grandmother buying the carp on Thursday, bringing it home, putting it in the bathtub when I was a kid. I played with it. And in the evening, when I went to sleep, the next day it wasn't there, and the next night we had gefilte fish. And so I set up this interior for Jay's offices, and I made a pedestal for a sculpture, and he didn't buy a sculpture, so I made one. I went around Toronto and found a bathtub like my grandmother's, and I put the fish in. It was a joke. I play with funny people like Oldenburg. We've been friends for a long time, and we've started to work on things a few years ago, and we did the performance piece in Venice, Italy, called the Course of the Coltello, the Swiss Army knife, and most of the imagery is Klaus's, but those two little boys are my sons, and they were Klaus's assistants. He was in the play. He was the Swiss Army knife. He was a souvenir salesman who wanted to be a painter, and I was Frankie P. Toronto, P for Palladio, dressed up like the AT&T building by Klaus, and with a fish hat. And the highlight of the performance was at the end, this beautiful object, the Swiss Army knife, which I get credit for participating in. I can tell you it's totally an Oldenburg. I had nothing to do with it. The only thing I did was I made it possible for them to turn those blades so you could sail this thing in the canal, because I love sailing. And we made it into a sailing craft. This is a piece of property in Brentwood, and a long time ago, about 82 or something, after my house, I designed a house for myself that would be a village of several pavilions around a courtyard. And the owner of this lot worked for me and built that actual model on the left. And she came back I guess, wealthier or something. Something happened. And asked me to design a house for her on this site. And following that basic idea of the village, we changed it as we got into it. I locked the house into the site by cutting the back end, here you see on the photograph of the site, slicing into it and putting all the bathrooms and dressing rooms like a retaining wall, creating a lower level zone for the master bedroom, which I designed like a kind of a barge, looking like a boat. And that's it built. The dome was a request from the client. She wanted a dome somewhere in the house. She didn't care where. When you sleep in this bedroom, I hope, I mean, I haven't slept in it yet. I've offered to marry her so I could sleep there. But I don't, she said I didn't have to do that. But Jay Chiat is a glutton for punishment, and he hired me to do a house for him in the Hamptons. And it's got a fish. And I keep thinking this is going to be the last fish. It's like a drug addict. I say, I'm not going to do it anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. I'm not going to do it. And then I do it. There it is. But it's the living room. And this piece here is, I don't know what it is. I just added it so that we'd have enough money in the budget so we could take something out. This is Euro Disney, and I've worked with all of the guys that presented to you earlier, and we've had a lot of fun working together. I think I'm from Mars for them, and they are for me. But somehow we all managed to work together, and I think productively so far. This is a shopping thing that you come into the Magic Kingdom and the hotel that Tony Baxter and his group are doing off here. And then this is a kind of a shopping mall with a rodeo and restaurants and another restaurant. And then what I did is because of the Paris skies being quite dull, I made a light grid that's perpendicular to the train station, to the route of the train. It looks like it's kind of been there and then crashed all these simpler forms into it. The light grid will have a light be lit up at night and give a kind of light ceiling to the... In Barcelona, I was asked to do a fish, and we're working on that at the foot of a Ritz-Carlton tower being done by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. And the Ritz-Carlton tower is being designed with exposed steel, non-fireproof, and much like those old gas tanks. And so we took the language of this exposed steel and used it, perverted it into the form of the fish, and created a kind of a 19th century contraption, it looks like, that will sit. This is the beach and the harbor out in front, and this is really a shopping center with department stores, and we split these bridges. Originally this was all solid with a hole in it. We cut them loose and made several bridges and created a kind of a foreground for this hotel. We showed this to the hotel people the other day, and they were terrified and said that nobody would come to the Ritz-Carlton anymore because of this fish. And finally, I just threw these in. Lou Danziger. I didn't expect Lou Danziger to be here, but this is the building I did for him in 1964, I think. A little studio, and it's sadly for sale. Time goes on. And this is my son working with me on a small fast food thing. He designed the robot as the cashier, and head moves, and I did the rest of it. And the food wasn't as good as the stuff, and so it failed. It should have been the other way around. The food should have been good first, but it didn't work. Thank you very much.